golden light of a Chicago autumn spilled through the tall, arched windows of Baker's Haven, a historic hotel nestled in the heart of Bronzeville. The air was thick with the scent of roses and polished mahogany, and the grand ballroom buzzed with anticipation. Guests in tailored suits and shimmering gowns milled about their murmurs, blending with the soft strains of a string quartet. At the center of it all stood Charlotte Baker, a vision in her mother's vintage lace gown, its ivory folds catching the light like a whisper of the past. Her ebony skin glowed under the chandelier's gleam, and her eyes, deep and resolute, held a spark of defiance beneath her veil. Today was meant to be her wedding day, a moment to seal her legacy and honor her mother's memory. But destiny had other plans. Charlotte's heart thrummed with a mix of pride and trepidation. Baker's Haven wasn't just a hotel. It was her mother's dream, a beacon of black excellence in a neighborhood that pulsed with history. The hotel was a living testament to her mother's vision, from its Art Deco facade to the jazz nights that once drew crowds across the city. But the dichuk, her mother's will, carried a weight Charlotte hadn't anticipated. To inherit Baker's Haven, she had to marry before her 30th birthday, a milestone just days away. It was a clause rooted in her mother's old-fashioned belief in family as the legacy anchor, but it felt like a chain to Charlotte. She had chosen Michael Thornton, a charming real estate investor, with a smile that promised stability, or so she thought. A shadow flickered in her peripheral vision as she stood in the bridal suite, adjusting the delicate veil that had once crowned her mother's head. Her best friend Lila burst through the door, her face a storm of urgency. "Charlotte, you need to see this. Now!" Her voice trembled, and she clutched a phone, its screen glowing with a video that would unravel everything. Charlotte's breath caught as she watched. The grainy footage showed Michael, her fiancé, in a dimly lit corner of the hotel's lounge, his arms wrapped around her sister Vanessa. Their laughter was a blade cutting through the fragile hope Charlotte had clung to. The video looped each frame, searing the betrayal deeper into her soul. With her calculated smile and designer heels, Vanessa had always coveted what wasn't hers. But Michael, he was supposed to be her partner, her safe harbor. The room spun, and Charlotte gripped the edge of the vanity, her reflection a stranger in the mirror. How could they? She whispered, her voice a fragile thread. Lila touched her shoulder, but the comfort felt distant, like a memory of warmth. Charlotte's mind raced. The wedding was in an hour. Guests were seated, the officiant waiting, and the dichuk loomed like a specter. If she didn't marry today, Baker's Haven would slip through her fingers, likely into Vanessa's grasp. The thought was unbearable. This hotel was more than brick and mortar. It was her mother's laughter echoing in the halls, the jazz records she played on quiet nights, the stories of Bronzeville's resilience etched into every wall. Losing it would be like losing her mother all over again. She straightened, wiping a single tear from her cheek. She said, "I won't let them take this from me," her voice hardening with resolve. Lila's eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" Charlotte didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped out of the suite, her gown trailing behind her like a comet's tail, and descended the grand staircase into the bustling lobby. The lobby of Baker's Haven was a masterpiece of history and elegance, with its mosaic tiles and brass fixtures gleaming under the soft light. Staff moved with practiced grace, their uniforms crisp, their smiles warm. Among them was Kenneth King, a waiter whose presence Charlotte had noticed in passing. He was unassuming, yet striking, with tousled chestnut hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to see more than they let on. He moved through the crowd with a quiet confidence, balancing a tray of champagne flutes with effortless precision. Something about him, a stillness, a depth, drew her attention even now in the chaos of her unraveling world. Charlotte approached him, her heart pounding. "Kenneth," she said, her voice steady despite the storm within. He turned, his gaze meeting hers, and the world fell away momentarily. "Yes, Ms. Baker." His tone was polite, but there was a warmth, a flicker of curiosity that made her pulse quicken. "I need your help," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "Please marry me. Right now." The request hung in the air, absurd and electric. Kenneth's brow furrowed, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he set the tray down carefully, his eyes searching hers. "Marry you." He repeated, his voice low, almost intimate. "That's unexpected." Charlotte took a breath, her resolve stealing. "My fiancé betrayed me. My sister's involved. If I don't marry today, I lose this hotel, my mother's legacy. This sounds wild, but I'm asking you to trust me. Please." Her voice cracked on the last word, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. Kenneth studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, a slow smile curved his lips. "I've always been a fan of bold moves," he said. "Let's do it." The next hour was a whirlwind. Charlotte led Kenneth to the ballroom, where guests murmured in confusion as the groom was replaced by a man in a waiter's vest. The officiant, a kind-eyed woman who had known Charlotte's mother, raised an eyebrow, but proceeded without question. Charlotte's hands trembled as she took Kenneth's, his touch steady and warm. "Do you, Kenneth King, take Charlotte Baker to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the officiant asked. Kenneth's gaze never wavered. "I do," he said, his voice clear and resonant, carrying a weight that made Charlotte's heart skip. When it was her turn, Charlotte hesitated, her mind flashing to her mother's smile, to the nights they'd spent dreaming of Baker's Haven's future. This wasn't the love story she'd imagined, but the choice would keep her mother's dream alive. "I do," she whispered, and the room erupted in applause, tinged with whispers of scandal and intrigue. As the ceremony ended, Charlotte and Kenneth stood side by side, strangers bound by a vow. She glanced at him, his profile sharp against the golden light, and felt a flicker of something, perhaps gratitude, or the faint stirrings of something more profound. But before she could dwell on it, Vanessa stormed through the crowd, her face a mask of fury. "You think this farce will save you?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "This hotel will be mine, Charlotte. You've just delayed the inevitable." Charlotte squared her shoulders, her eyes blazing. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Vanessa's gaze flicked to Kenneth, a sneer curling her lips. "A waiter." "Really, Charlotte? You've sunk low." Kenneth's expression remained calm, but his hand tightened slightly around Charlotte's, a silent promise of support. As Vanessa stormed off, Charlotte felt a surge of determination. She didn't know Kenneth King, but she knew she'd made the right choice at that moment. The reception that followed was a blur of toasts and forced smiles. Charlotte played the part of the radiant bride, but her mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle of her sister's betrayal and the weight of her new reality. Kenneth, for his part, was the perfect groom, charming, attentive, deflecting curious questions with a disarming smile. When the night drew close, they were alone on the hotel's rooftop terrace, the Chicago skyline glittering below. The air was cool, scented with the faint tang of Lake Michigan, and the stars above seemed to hold their breath. "Thank you," Charlotte said, breaking the silence. "I know this was unconventional." Kenneth leaned against the railing, his eyes catching the city lights. "Unconventional's my kind of thing," he said, his tone light, but laced with something more profound. "But why me? You could have picked anyone." Charlotte considered the question, her fingers tracing the edge of her mother's veil, now tucked into her hands. "She said you looked like someone who wouldn't run from a challenge." And I was right. Kenneth's gaze softened, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them standing on the edge of something unknown. "You're not what I expected, Charlotte Baker," he said, his voice a low murmur, that sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't respond. But as they stood there, the city humming below, she felt the first stirrings of a connection, a spark that could either light her path or burn everything down. Baker's Haven awoke to the gentle hum of routine the morning after the wedding. The lobby gleamed with the polish of history, its mosaic tiles reflecting the early sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. Charlotte Baker stood at the heart of it all, her wedding gown replaced by a tailored blazer and skirt, her dark curls pulled back in a determined knot. The weight of her new reality pressed against her chest, married to a stranger, bound by a vow born of desperation, and now tasked with saving a hotel teetering on the edge of ruin. But Charlotte was no stranger to battles. She was her mother's daughter, forged in the fire of Bronzeville's unyielding spirit, and she would not let Baker's Haven fall. The hotel was more than a business. It was a sanctuary. Its walls had witnessed jazz legends improvising late into the night, community leaders plotting progress over coffee, and families celebrating milestones under its crystal chandeliers. But the financial ledgers told a grim story. Michael's investment firm had been the hotel's lifeline, and his betrayal had severed it. Without his capital, Baker's Haven faced mounting debts, and Charlotte knew her sister Vanessa was circling like a vulture, ready to seize the opportunity. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts as Charlotte reviewed the books in her office. Kenneth King stood in the doorway, no longer in his waiter's vest, but in a crisp white shirt and jeans that hugged his frame effortlessly. His green eyes held a quiet intensity, and the faint smile on his lips hinted at a secret he wasn't ready to share. "Mind if I interrupt?" he asked, his voice a warm cadence that filled the room. Charlotte gestured to a chair, her curiosity piqued. "You're not on shift today, are you?" she asked, her tone cautious but not unkind. Kenneth shook his head, settling into the seat with a grace that belied his supposed station. "You might need a sounding board," he said. "Running a place like this can't be easy, especially after yesterday." His words were gentle, but they carried a weight that made Charlotte pause. Beyond the waiter's facade, something about him stirred her suspicion and intrigue. "I've managed so far," she said, her voice cool, but not dismissive. "But since you're here, you could explain why you said yes to a stranger's proposal." Kenneth's smile deepened, a flicker of amusement dancing in his eyes. "Perhaps I saw something worth betting on," he said. "This hotel, this legacy, it's worth fighting for. And so are you." His words hung in the air, a quiet challenge wrapped in sincerity. Charlotte's heart skipped, but she pushed the feeling aside. She couldn't afford to trust so easily, not after Michael. Before she could respond, her assistant Marcus burst into the room, his face pale. "Charlotte, you need to see this." He handed her a folder containing a bombshell, a contract signed by her father, Gregory, and Vanessa, selling a significant share of Baker's Haven to Michael's firm at a fraction of its value. The document was dated just days before her wedding, a calculated move to undermine her claim. Charlotte's blood ran cold. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a declaration of war. "They're trying to steal it," she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. Kenneth leaned forward, his expression darkening as he scanned the document over her shoulder. "This isn't legal," he said, his tone sharp with certainty. "The signatures don't align with the board's approval records. It's a forgery." Charlotte looked at him, startled by his insight. "How do you know that?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Kenneth hesitated, then shrugged. He said, "I've seen my share of contracts," his voice deliberately casual. "Let me make some calls. I know people who can verify this." Charlotte nodded, her mind racing. She didn't know Kenneth well enough to trust him fully, but his calm assurance was a lifeline in the storm. As he stepped out to make his calls, she turned her attention to the battle ahead. Vanessa and Gregory had underestimated her, but they wouldn't for long. She summoned the hotel's board, a group of longtime allies and community leaders who had known her mother. With its oak table and portraits of Bronzeville's pioneers, the meeting room felt like a war room as Charlotte laid out the evidence of the forged contract. Vanessa arrived late, her heels clicking with deliberate arrogance. "What's this about Charlotte?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. Gregory followed, his face a mask of false concern. Charlotte stood, her presence commanding the room. "This," she said, holding up the contract, "is your attempt to sell my mother's legacy behind my back. It's a fake, and I'm going to prove it." Vanessa's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "You're delusional," she said. "This hotel is failing. You can't run it, Charlotte. Let us save it." The board murmured, torn between loyalty to Charlotte's mother and the allure of Michael's promised funds. But before the discussion could spiral, Kenneth re-entered, a folder in hand. "I had a friend at the city clerk's office run a check," he said, his voice steady. "The signatures don't match. This contract is void." He handed the evidence to the board chair, a respected elder named Mrs. Coleman, whose sharp eyes scanned the documents. "He's right," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is a fraud." Vanessa's face flushed with rage, but she held her tongue. Gregory, less composed, slammed a fist on the table. "Can you outsmart us, Charlotte? This isn't over." As they stormed out, Charlotte felt a surge of triumph tempered by unease. She turned to Kenneth, who stood quietly by the window, his silhouette framed against the Chicago skyline. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "I don't know how you pulled that off, but you saved me today." Kenneth turned, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that caught her breath. "You saved yourself," he said. "I just gave you the tools." There it was again, that spark, that unspoken connection that made her heart race. But before she could probe further, Marcus interrupted with news of a new crisis. Michael had withdrawn his firm's funding, leaving Baker's Haven on the brink of bankruptcy. The weight of it crashed over Charlotte, but Kenneth's presence grounded her. He said, "We'll find a way," his voice a quiet promise. Together. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in hues of amber and violet, Charlotte and Kenneth walked through Bronzeville's streets. The neighborhood hummed with Life Street vendors calling out jazz spilling from a nearby club, children laughing as they played on the sidewalks. Charlotte paused by a mural of her mother painted on the side of a community center. "She built this hotel to give Bronzeville a heart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't lose it." Kenneth stood beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "You won't," he said. "This place and legacy are stronger than any contract or betrayal, and so are you." His words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of her fear. They stood silently momentarily, the city's pulse syncing with their own. Charlotte glanced at him, her heart stirring with a warmth she wasn't ready to name. Kenneth King was a mystery, but he was also her ally, her partner in this improbable vow. And as the stars emerged above Chicago, she felt a flicker of hope that this marriage was more than a means to an end. The dawn broke over Chicago with a quiet grace, casting a soft glow across the rooftops of Bronzeville. Baker's Haven stood as a sentinel of history, its Art Deco spires catching the first light like a crown. Inside, the air was thick with fresh coffee and the hum of early morning preparations. Charlotte Baker moved through the lobby with purpose, her heels clicking against the mosaic tiles, each step a declaration of her resolve. The weight of her impromptu marriage to Kenneth King lingered like a melody she couldn't quite place, simultaneously exhilarating and unsettling. She had saved her mother's legacy, but at what cost? And who had this man stepped into her life with such disarming ease? Charlotte's office, tucked behind the grand staircase, was her sanctuary. The walls were adorned with framed photographs of Bronzeville's golden era, jazz musicians, mid-performance, community leaders laughing over dinner, her mother's radiant smile presiding over it all. She sank into the leather chair, her fingers tracing the edge of a ledger that told a grim tale. Without Michael's funding, Baker's Haven was a ship adrift, its accounts bleeding red. But Charlotte was no stranger to storms. She had inherited her mother's fire, which burned brightest in adversity. As she pored over the numbers, a soft knock broke her focus. Kenneth stood in the doorway, his presence as arresting as ever. Gone was the waiter's vest. Today, he wore a tailored blazer that accentuated his broad shoulders, his green eyes catching the morning light like emeralds. "Good morning, Mrs. King," he said, his voice a low, teasing murmur that sent a shiver through her. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, masking the flutter in her chest. She replied, "Don't get too comfortable with that title, though." A smile tugged at her lips. "What brings you here so early?" Kenneth stepped inside, closing the door with a quiet click. "I heard about the board meeting today," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "You're walking into a lion's den with Vanessa and Gregory. You might need an ally." His words were earnest, but there was a flicker of something else in his gaze, something guarded like a secret held just out of reach. Charlotte studied him, her instincts warring between trust and caution. "You seem to know a lot for a server," she said, her voice light but probing. Kenneth's smile was enigmatic, a curved lip that promised answers he wasn't ready to give. "I've been around," he said, leaning against the desk with a casual grace. "Let's say I've got a knack for reading situations and people." His eyes held hers, and for a moment the room felt smaller, the air charged with an unspoken connection. Charlotte broke the gaze, her heart racing. She couldn't afford distractions, not when her sister's betrayal loomed like a gathering storm. The board meeting was held in the hotel's executive suite, a room of polished oak and stained glass windows that overlooked the vibrant streets of Bronzeville. The board members, local business owners, community elders, and a few investors sat around a long table, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. Vanessa swept in her crimson dress, a bold contrast to the room's muted tones, her smile as sharp as a blade. Gregory followed, his presence heavy with the weight of old grudges. Charlotte stood at the head of the table, her posture regaled her mother's strength coursing through her veins. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charlotte began, her voice steady, "we face a critical moment for Baker's Haven. My sister and father have tried to undermine this hotel with a forged contract, but we've proven its invalidity. We must secure new funding to keep my mother's dream alive." Vanessa's laugh cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "Dreams don't pay bills." "Charlotte," she said, "you're out of your depth. Sell the hotel to Michael's firm and be done with it." Before Charlotte could respond, the door opened and Kenneth entered, commanding attention. But he wasn't alone. A tall woman in a sharp suit followed, her briefcase embossed with the logo of King Enterprises, a name that sent a ripple of recognition through the room. "I'm Evelyn Carter, representing King Enterprises," she said, her voice crisp. "We're interested in partnering with Baker's Haven to ensure its future." She placed a proposal on the table, its pages detailing a substantial investment that could save the hotel. Charlotte's breath caught her eyes flicking to Kenneth. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable but steady. "Mr. King facilitated this meeting." Evelyn continued, nodding toward Kenneth. "He's been advocating for Baker's Haven's potential." The room buzzed with whispers. Vanessa's face paled, her composure cracking. "A waiter," she scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. Gregory's eyes narrowed, sensing a shift in the power dynamic. As Evelyn outlined the proposal, Charlotte's mind raced. King Enterprises was a titan in Chicago's real estate world, known for its discretion, and deep pockets. Why would they care about a struggling hotel in Bronzeville? And why was Kenneth a supposed waiter, their point of contact? The questions swirled, but she pushed them aside, focusing on the opportunity. "This partnership could preserve our legacy," she said, addressing the board. "It's what my mother would have wanted, a future where Baker's Haven remains a beacon for our community." The board voted to explore the partnership, a small victory that felt like a lifeline. As the meeting adjourned, Vanessa pulled Charlotte aside, her eyes blazing. "You think you've won," she hissed. "This hotel will be mine one way or another." Charlotte held her ground, her voice low but fierce. "Not while I'm standing." Vanessa stormed out, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. Later, as the sun dipped low, Charlotte painted the Chicago skyline in hues of rose and gold and found Kenneth on the hotel's rooftop terrace. The city stretched before them, its lights twinkling like stars brought to earth. "You're not just a waiter, are you?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. Kenneth leaned against the railing, his profile sharp against the fading light. "I'm someone who believes in this place," he said, his tone evasive yet warm. "And in you." Charlotte stepped closer, the space between them charged with possibility. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Kenneth hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small weathered photograph. It showed a young woman, Charlotte's mother, standing beside a man in a suit, smiling before Baker's Haven. "My father knew your mother," he said quietly. "They worked together years ago, dreaming of making this hotel a landmark. I came here to understand that dream, and I stayed because of you." The revelation hit Charlotte like a wave, stirring memories of her mother's stories about a partner who shared her vision. Could Kenneth be connected to that past? Her heart ached with its weight, but also with a flicker of hope. "You could have told me," she said, her voice trembling. Kenneth's gaze softened, his hand brushing hers, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through her. "I wanted you to trust me for me," he said. "Not for my name or my connections." The city hummed below its rhythm, a counterpoint to the quiet intensity between them. Charlotte felt the pull of something more profound, a connection that transcended their hasty vows. But the shadow of secrets lingered, and as she looked into Kenneth's eyes, she wondered what else he was hiding, and whether her heart could bear the truth. The streets of Bronzeville pulsed with life as evening settled over Chicago, the neon glow of jazz clubs mingling with the laughter of passers-by. Baker's Haven stood at the heart of it all, its lights a warm invitation against the cool autumn air. Charlotte Baker moved through the hotel's kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, her hands dusted with flour as she helped prepare for a community event. The scent of cornbread and collard greens filled the air, a nod to the recipes her mother had perfected in this space. But a storm was brewing beneath the bustle, threatening to tear her world apart. Charlotte had barely slept since the board meeting. The partnership with King Enterprises was a lifeline, but it came with questions she couldn't shake. Kenneth King's revelation about his father's connection to her mother had stirred something in her, a mix of hope and unease. He was no mere waiter, that much was clear, but the extent of his secrets remained shrouded. And now, new threats loomed. Her sister Vanessa had escalated her campaign to seize Baker's Haven, spreading rumors on social media that the hotel was mismanaged and its legacy tarnished. The lies stung, but Charlotte refused to let them take root. As she plated a tray of appetizers, Kenneth appeared in the kitchen doorway, his presence a quiet anchor amidst the chaos. He wore a simple sweater, the fabric clinging to his frame in a way that made Charlotte's pulse quicken. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice a low hum that seemed to steady her nerves. She nodded, handing him a tray. "You're getting good at this," she said, a teasing lilt in her tone. Kenneth grinned, his green eyes sparkling. he said. "I've had practice keeping things in balance," his words carrying a double meaning that made her heart skip. Their banter was cut short by a commotion in the lobby. Charlotte rushed out, Kenneth close behind, to find a group of men in dark jackets confronting Marcus, her assistant. Their voices were low, but menacing, their presence out of place in the hotel's elegant space. "Where's Charlotte Baker?" one demanded, his eyes scanning the room. Charlotte stepped forward, her chin lifted. "I'm right here," she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her gut. "What do you want?" The leader, a burly man with a scar above his brow, smirked. "A message from your sister," he said. "Hand over the hotel or things get messy." Before Charlotte could respond, Kenneth moved in front of her, his stance protective. He said, "You're on the wrong side of town for threats," his voice calm, but edged with steel. The men laughed, but their bravado faltered when two security guards, Paul and Rick men, Charlotte had seen around Kenneth, appeared, their presence commanding. The confrontation ended swiftly, the men retreating with muttered curses, but the message was clear: Vanessa was playing dirty. Charlotte's hands trembled in her office as she poured herself a glass of water. Kenneth stood by the window, his expression unreadable. "That was Vanessa's doing," she said, her voice tight. "She's desperate to push me out." Kenneth turned, his eyes locking onto hers. "She won't succeed," he said. "Not while I'm here." His words were a vow, and for a moment Charlotte felt the weight of her fears lift. But the question lingered. Why was he so invested? Determined to fight back. Charlotte devised a plan to counter Vanessa's rumors. She organized a community dinner at Baker's Haven, inviting Bronzeville's residents to celebrate the hotel's legacy. The event was a chance to rebuild trust and showcase the hotel's heart. As preparations intensified, Kenneth proved invaluable, coordinating with suppliers and charming guests with his effortless charisma. But his efficiency raised more questions. When a delivery of fresh produce arrived just in time to replace a spoiled batch sabotaged, Charlotte suspected by Vanessa's allies, Kenneth shrugged off her gratitude. "I know a guy," he said, his smile deflecting her curiosity. The night of the dinner, Baker's Haven glowed with warmth. Tables were set with crisp linens, and the air was alive with the soulful strains of a local jazz trio. Charlotte moved through the crowd, her smile radiant as she greeted neighbors and elders who had known her mother. Kenneth was at her side, his presence a steady comfort. Their hands brushed as they served plates of her mother's signature gumbo, and Charlotte felt a spark that lingered long after the moment passed. But the evening wasn't without its shadows. Midway through, Vanessa arrived uninvited, her presence a chill in the warm room. She approached Charlotte, her smile venomous. "You think a party will save this place?" she said, her voice low enough to avoid attention. "I've got investors lined up who'll buy this hotel for pennies once you fail." Charlotte's blood boiled, but before she could retort, Kenneth stepped forward, his voice smooth but firm. "Baker is building something lasting here," he said. "You'd do well to respect that." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, taking in Kenneth with suspicion and disdain. "And who are you exactly?" she asked. Kenneth's smile was disarming, but his words carried weight. "Just someone who believes in legacies," he said. Vanessa scoffed, but retreated, her exit a silent promise of further conflict. As the crowd applauded a toast to Baker's Haven, Charlotte turned to Kenneth, her heart a tangle of gratitude and curiosity. "You keep surprising me," she said, her voice soft. He met her gaze, his eyes warm with something unspoken. "Good," he said. "I like keeping you on your toes." After the guests departed, Charlotte and Kenneth lingered in the empty ballroom, the jazz trio's final notes fading into the night. The skyline glittered through the windows, a canvas of light and shadow. Charlotte sat on the edge of a table, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Kenneth joined her, his presence a quiet strength. "You were incredible tonight," he said, his voice low and earnest. "This place, it's alive because of you." Charlotte looked at him, her defenses softening. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "But I need to know, Kenneth. Who are you, really?" He hesitated, then reached for her hand, his touch gentle but electric. "I'm someone who sees you," he said. "Not just the hotel, the legacy, but you, Charlotte Baker, the woman who fights for what matters." His words wrapped around her heart, stirring a warmth she hadn't felt in years. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, a new threat, this time in the form of a smear campaign targeting the hotel's reputation online. As Charlotte read the message, her resolve hardened. Vanessa's attacks were relentless, but she wasn't alone in this fight. Kenneth's hand lingered on hers, a silent promise that they would face the storm together. And as the Chicago night unfolded around them, Charlotte felt a spark of something new. Not just hope, but the possibility of love, fragile and untested, waiting to bloom. The twilight draped Chicago in a velvet embrace, the skyline of Bronzeville shimmering under a canopy of stars. Baker's Haven stood as a beacon of warmth, its golden lights spilling onto the cobblestone streets, where the echoes of jazz and laughter wove a tapestry of community. Inside the hotel's kitchen was a sanctuary of memory, its walls steeped in the scent of spices and the ghosts of recipes past. Charlotte Baker stood at the counter, her hands kneading dough with a rhythm mirrored her mother's each motion, a tether to a legacy she fought to preserve. Her dark curls framed her face, and her eyes, deep and soulful, held a quiet strength tempered by the weight of recent battles. The past days had been a whirlwind of defiance and discovery. Charlotte had faced her sister Vanessa's venomous schemes, from forged contracts to hired threats, each move a calculated strike against Baker's Haven. Yet through it all, Kenneth King had been her unexpected anchor, a man whose quiet confidence and enigmatic presence stirred something within her she wasn't ready to name. His revelation about his father's connection to her mother had cracked open a door to the past, but it also cast shadows of doubt. Who was he really? And why did his touch and gaze feel like a melody she'd known all her life? As she shaped the dough into loaves, the kitchen door swung open, and Kenneth stepped inside, his silhouette framed by the soft glow of the hallway. He wore a simple linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and his green eyes caught the lamplight sparkling with a warmth that made Charlotte's breath catch. "You're up late," he said, his voice a gentle caress that seemed to fill the room. "You might need some company." He held a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses, a playful smile tugging at his lips. Charlotte wiped her hands on her apron, a smile breaking through her fatigue. She teased that you're habitually showing up unannounced, though her heart fluttered at your presence. Kenneth set the glasses on the counter, pouring the wine with a grace that belied his supposed simplicity. "Guilty as charged," he said, handing her a glass. "But a night like this calls for something special." Their fingers brushed as she took the glass, and the brief contact sent a spark through her, like a note struck on a piano resonating deep within. They sat at the worn wooden table, the kitchen quiet, save for the soft hum of the oven. The wine was rich, and warmth spread through Charlotte as she studied Kenneth. "Why do you keep helping me?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. "You don't owe me anything, Kenneth. We're strangers who said, 'I do,' on a whim." Her words were challenging, but a yearning for truth lay beneath them. Kenneth leaned back, his gaze steady as if weighing his response. He said, "We're not strangers anymore," his voice low and earnest. "And this place, Baker's Haven, is more than a hotel. It's a piece of history, of heart. I can't walk away from that. Or from you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Charlotte's heart raced, torn between caution and the pull of something more profound. She stood moving to the oven to check the bread, needing a moment to gather her thoughts. The aroma of baking dough filled the space, a reminder of her mother's late-night baking sessions when she'd tell Charlotte stories of Bronzeville's resilience. "My mom used to make this bread," Charlotte said, her voice thick with memory. She'd say it was her way of feeding the soul of this place. She turned, finding Kenneth closer than she expected, his eyes soft with understanding. "Then let's feed some souls," he said, a smile breaking through the intensity. He took a knife and cut a slice from the freshly baked loaf, its crust golden and crisp. He spread a pat of butter, offering it to her, with a gentleness that felt intimate, almost sacred. Charlotte took a bite, the flavors bursting on her tongue. Warm, earthy, a taste of home. "It's perfect," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kenneth's gaze held hers, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them, the air charged with unspoken possibilities. A sharp knock at the kitchen door shattered their quiet moment. Marcus. Her assistant burst in his face, pale. "Charlotte, you need to see this," he said, holding out his phone. The screen displayed a vicious social media post accusing Baker's Haven of financial mismanagement and neglect. The comments were brutal, tearing at the hotel's reputation with lies that bore Vanessa's signature. Charlotte's hands clenched, the bread forgotten. "She's trying to destroy us," her voice trembling with fury. Kenneth's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a steadying presence. "We'll fight this," he said. "Together." Determined to counter the smear campaign, Charlotte devised a plan to host a jazz night, a nod to Baker's Haven's storied past. The event would unite the community, reminding them of the hotel's heart. Kenneth threw himself into the preparations, securing a local band and coordinating with vendors his impressive and suspicious efficiency. He deflected with a charming smile when Charlotte pressed him about his connections. He said, "I've got friends in low places," winking, but his eyes held a flicker of secrecy that made her wonder. The night of the event, Baker's Haven came alive. The ballroom glowed with candlelight, the jazz band's soulful notes weaving through the crowd. Charlotte moved among the guests, her smile radiant as she greeted neighbors and elders, her mother's spirit palpable in every laugh, every clink of glasses. Kenneth was at her side. His presence, a quiet strength, his charm disarming even the most skeptical guests. He extended a hand as the band played a slow, sultry tune. "Dance with me," he asked, his voice a velvet invitation. Charlotte hesitated, then took his hand, her heart pounding as he led her to the dance floor. His warm touch guided her with a confidence that felt new and familiar. They swayed to the music, the world fading, until it was just them, moving in sync with the rhythm of Bronzeville's heartbeat. "You're full of surprises," she murmured, her cheek close to his. Kenneth's lips curved, his breath warm against her ear. "You have no idea," he said, his voice a promise that sent a shiver down her spine. As the song ended, Charlotte caught sight of Vanessa in the crowd, her eyes glinting with malice. She approached, her voice low but venomous. "Enjoy your little party," she said. "It won't change the fact that this hotel is sinking. And when it does, I'll be waiting." Charlotte's temper flared, but Kenneth's hand tightened on hers, grounding her. "She's wrong," he whispered as Vanessa retreated. "You're building something unbreakable here." His words were a lifeline, and as the night drew to a close, Charlotte felt a shift within her, a spark of trust, of something more profound, blooming in the quiet spaces of her heart. They ended the evening on the hotel's balcony, the Chicago skyline, a glittering backdrop. The air was cool, scented with the faint tang of Lake Michigan, and the stars above seemed to pulse with possibility. Charlotte said, "You make me believe I can do this," her voice soft but steady. Kenneth turned to her, his eyes reflecting the city's lights. "You don't need me to believe," he said. "But I'm here anyway." His hand brushed hers, and in that fleeting touch, Charlotte felt the whisper of something new, a love that might just be worth the risk. The morning sun painted Chicago in hues of amber and rose, its light filtering through the stained glass windows of Baker's Haven, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the lobby. The hotel was a living canvas, its every corner steeped in the history of Bronzeville's resilience. Charlotte Baker stood behind the reception desk, her eyes scanning a tablet that displayed the latest blow to her legacy, a scathing online review orchestrated by Vanessa, claiming food poisoning from the previous night's jazz event. The lies stung, each word a dagger aimed at the heart of her mother's dream. But Charlotte was not one to crumble. She was forged in the fire of adversity and would fight with every ounce of her being. The past week had been a tapestry of triumphs and trials, and the jazz night had been a success, drawing the community together to celebrate Baker's Haven's soul. Yet Vanessa's relentless attacks, first the hired thugs, now this smear campaign, threatened to unravel everything. And then there was Kenneth King, the man who had stepped into her life like a melody she couldn't forget. His support was unwavering, his charm disarming, but his secrets lingered like shadows, casting doubt on the trust she desperately wanted to give. Their dance under the stars had stirred something within her, a thrilling and dangerous longing. Kenneth appeared as she drafted a response to the false review, his presence a quiet storm in the morning calm. He carried a tray of coffee and pastries, his green eyes warm with a mischief that made her heart skip. "Fuel for the fight," he said, setting the tray on the desk. "You looked like you could use it." Charlotte took a sip of the coffee, its richness grounding her. "You're spoiling me," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. Kenneth leaned against the counter, his gaze steady. "Someone's got to," he said, his voice a low hum that sent warmth through her veins. Their moment was interrupted by a commotion outside. Charlotte stepped onto the hotel's front steps, Kenneth at her side to find a delivery truck blocking the street. The driver, a nervous young man, handed her a clipboard. "Emergency delivery," he said. "Fresh produce, top quality, courtesy of an anonymous donor." Charlotte's brow furrowed, but Kenneth's knowing smile confirmed her suspicions. "You?" she asked, turning to him. He shrugged, his expression playfully evasive. "I know a guy who knows a guy," he said, but his eyes held a glint of something deeper, something that made her wonder just how far his influence reached. The delivery was a godsend, replacing a batch of spoiled ingredients, another of Vanessa's sabotage attempts. Charlotte was sure. Determined to turn the crisis into an opportunity, she planned a pop-up brunch to showcase Baker's Haven's resilience. The event would feature her mother's recipes, a love letter to the community that had rallied behind her. Kenneth threw himself into the preparations, his efficiency almost uncanny. Her curiosity deepened when she caught him on the phone, hushedly speaking about securing the supply chain. "You're not just a waiter, are you?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. Kenneth's smile was enigmatic, a curved lip that promised answers he wasn't ready to give. He said, "I'm just a guy trying to help," but his tone held a weight that made her heart race. As they worked side by side, setting tables and arranging flowers, their hands brushed and the air crackled with unspoken tension. Charlotte felt his pull like a tide drawing her closer to an uncharted shore. But trust was fragile, and she wasn't sure she could afford to let it bloom. The brunch was a triumph, the courtyard of Baker's Haven filled with laughter and the clink of plates. Community members savored dishes like shrimp and grits and sweet potato pie, their praise a balm to Charlotte's wounded spirit. But the victory was short-lived. As the event wound down, a man approached, his suit sharp and his demeanor colder. Ryan Carter introduced himself, his voice clipped. "I'm an influencer, and I'm here to review your hotel." His smile was polite but predatory, and Charlotte's instincts screamed that Vanessa was behind his visit. Ryan's presence was a test, and Charlotte knew it. She guided him through the hotel, highlighting its history and charm, but his questions were pointed, probing for weaknesses. When he tasted a dish and grimaced, claiming it was off, Charlotte's heart sank. She glanced at Kenneth, who was already moving toward the kitchen, his expression grim. Moments later, he returned with a fresh plate, the dish replaced with flawless precision. "Try this," he said, his voice calm but firm. Ryan took a bite, his skepticism melting into reluctant approval. "Not bad," he admitted, but his eyes lingered on Kenneth as if sensing a puzzle he couldn't solve. As Ryan departed, promising a review that could make or break Baker's Haven, Charlotte pulled Kenneth aside. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice a mix of gratitude and suspicion. He shrugged, his smile disarming. "I told you I know a guy." But his evasion only deepened her curiosity. That evening, as they cleaned up the courtyard, the Chicago skyline glowing in the distance, Charlotte confronted him. "You're hiding something," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "I need to know what it is." Kenneth paused, his eyes searching hers. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of the city. He said, "I came here because of your mother." His voice low. "She and my father had a vision for this place, a vision I wanted to understand. But I stayed because of you, Charlotte. You're not just fighting for a hotel. You're fighting for a legacy and community. I can't walk away from that." His words were a confession, raw and unguarded, and they struck a chord deep within her. Charlotte stepped closer, the space between them electric. "You could have told me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Kenneth's hand reached for hers, his touch a quiet promise. "I wanted you to see me," he said. "Not my name, not my connections, just me." The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable, and for a moment, Charlotte let herself believe in the possibility of him. But as they stood under the stars, a new message from Marcus shattered the moment Vanessa had escalated her attack, spreading rumors of a health code violation that could shut down Baker's Haven for good. Charlotte's resolve hardened, but Kenneth's hand in hers was a reminder that she wasn't alone. As the Chicago night unfolded, its lights a mirror to the fire in her heart, she felt a spark of something new, a fragile but growing trust, a love that might just be worth the fight. The Chicago skyline shimmered under a crescent moon, its spires piercing the velvet night like silent promises. In Bronzeville, Baker's Haven glowed with a warmth that defied the autumn chill, its Art Deco facade a testament to dreams carved from grit and heart. Charlotte Baker stood in the hotel's garden courtyard, the air fragrant with late-blooming jasmine and the distant hum of jazz from a nearby club. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cool breeze, but from the weight of a truth she could no longer ignore. Kenneth King, the man she had married on a whim, was no mere waiter. His actions securing deliveries, diffusing crises, standing by her against Vanessa's venom, hinted at a power and purpose far beyond his role. Yet every step closer to him felt like a dance on the edge of a precipice, her heart torn between trust and the fear of another betrayal. The past weeks had woven a tapestry of triumphs and trials. Charlotte had faced her sister's relentless schemes, from forged contracts to orchestrated scandals, each blow aimed at wresting Baker's Haven from her grasp. Kenneth had been her shield, his quiet strength, a beacon in the storm. Their shared moments kneading dough in the kitchen, swaying to jazz under the stars, had kindled a spark she hadn't dared name. But his secrets lingered, a shadow that darkened the edges of her growing feelings. Tonight she needed answers even if they shattered the fragile hope blooming within her. As she paced the courtyard, the crunch of gravel announced Kenneth's arrival. He emerged from the shadows, his silhouette sharp against the hotel's golden lights. His linen shirt was open at the collar, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin, and his green eyes held a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You're up late," he said, his voice a soft caress that seemed to wrap around her. "Couldn't sleep." Charlotte met his gaze, her resolve steeling. "I need to know the truth, Kenneth," she said, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "Who are you really, and why are you here?" Kenneth's expression softened, but he didn't look away. Instead, he gestured to a wrought iron bench beneath a magnolia tree, its petals scattered like stars on the ground. They sat the space between them charged with unspoken questions. "I owe you that much," he said, his voice low and earnest. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small tarnished locket. Inside was a photograph of a young couple, Charlotte's mother radiant in a floral dress and a man with Kenneth's eyes, standing before Baker's Haven. "This was my father," Kenneth said. "He and your mother were partners not just in business, but in a vision to make this hotel a cornerstone of Bronzeville's pride. When she passed, he made me promise to protect that dream." Charlotte's breath caught her fingers tracing the locket's edge. The revelation connected her past to the present, bridging her mother's legacy and the man before her. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kenneth's gaze was steady, his hand brushing hers in a fleeting electric touch. "I wanted to know you first," he said, "not as a legacy or a duty, but as Charlotte, the woman who fights with her whole heart. I stayed because I saw you, and I couldn't look away." His words were a melody, weaving through the cracks in her defenses. Charlotte felt their weight and the sincerity that shimmered in his eyes. But before she could respond, a sharp cry broke the night. "Marcus!" Her assistant stumbled into the courtyard, his face pale. "Charlotte, trouble!" he gasped, holding out his phone. The screen displayed a news alert, a fabricated report claiming Baker's Haven was facing foreclosure, with Vanessa quoted as the concerned family member ready to save the hotel. The lies were a dagger twisting in Charlotte's heart. "She's relentless," she whispered, her voice thick with fury. Kenneth's hand tightened on hers, grounding her. "We'll fight this," he said, his voice a quiet vow. "But we need to move fast." Charlotte nodded, her mind racing. Vanessa's lies were gaining traction, and the hotel's reputation hung by a thread. She devised a plan, a press conference, to set the record straight, showcasing Baker's Haven's resilience and community support. Kenneth offered to leverage his contacts, vague as always, to secure media coverage, his efficiency both a comfort and a puzzle. The next day, Baker's Haven buzzed with preparations. Charlotte worked tirelessly, drafting statements and rallying community leaders to stand by her side. Kenneth was a whirlwind of action, coordinating with reporters and ensuring the event ran smoothly. When she caught him on a call speaking in low tones about King Enterprises' support, her suspicions flared. She said, "You keep mentioning these contacts and cornering him in the lobby. Who are you really working with?" Kenneth's smile was disarming, but his eyes held a flicker of caution. "Just people who believe in this place," he said. "Trust me, Charlotte." The press conference was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over the crowd. Charlotte stood at the podium, her presence commanding, her mother's strength radiating from her. "Baker's Haven is not just a hotel," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "It's a legacy of community, of resilience, of heart. The rumors of foreclosure are lies spread by those who seek to profit from our struggle. We will not falter." The crowd erupted in applause, their support a shield against Vanessa's schemes. But Vanessa was not one to be outdone. She slipped into the room, her crimson lips curled in a mocking smile. She called out, "Bold words, sister." Her voice cut through the applause. But dreams don't pay debts. Sell now, or watch this place crumble. The reporters stirred, sensing a story, but Charlotte held her ground. She said, "This hotel is my mother's heart," her eyes blazing. "And it's worth more than your greed could ever understand." Kenneth stepped forward, his presence a quiet force. He said, "Ms. Baker has the backing of those who value legacy over profit, and his voice is calm, but commanding. King Enterprises stands with her." The mention of King Enterprises sent a ripple through the room. Vanessa's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing at Kenneth. "You're out of your league, waiter," she spat. But her words lacked conviction. As she stormed out, Charlotte felt a surge of triumph tempered by the weight of Kenneth's words. King Enterprises was a titan, and his connection to it was no coincidence. The realization stirred a mix of awe and unease. Her heart caught in a dance of trust and doubt. That evening, they found themselves on the hotel's rooftop, the Chicago skyline a glittering canvas below. The air was cool, scented with the promise of rain, and the city's pulse seemed to echo their own. Charlotte leaned against the railing, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "You keep saving me," she said, her voice soft but searching. "But I need to know why." Kenneth stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, sending warmth through her. He said, "Because you're worth it," his voice a whisper that carried the weight of truth. "This hotel, this community, they're worth everything." Charlotte turned to him, her heart racing. His eyes held hers, and for a moment the world fell away, leaving only the two of them bound by a vow that felt less like a contract and more like fate. "I want to trust you," she said, her voice trembling with vulnerability. Kenneth's hand cupped her cheek, his touch gentle but electric. "Then let me show you," he said, his voice a promise that lingered in the night air. As the first raindrops fell, Charlotte felt a spark ignite a love that might be strong enough to weather any storm. The dawn broke over Chicago with a fiery intensity, the sun painting the skyline in shades of crimson and gold. Baker's Haven stood resolute in Bronzeville, its walls a silent witness to the battles fought within and without. Charlotte Baker moved through the hotel's grand lobby, her steps purposeful, her heart a crucible of resolve and longing. The press conference had been a victory, a defiant stand against Vanessa's lies, but the war was far from over. Her sister's schemes grew bolder, and the shadow of Kenneth King's secrets loomed larger, a puzzle that thrilled and unnerved her. Under the first drops of rain, their rooftop moment had ignited something within her, a flame of trust, of possibility that she couldn't ignore. Charlotte's morning was a whirlwind of action. The false foreclosure rumors had shaken the hotel's staff, and she spent hours reassuring them, her voice steady despite the storm within. Baker's Haven was more than a business. It was a family, a legacy woven into the fabric of Bronzeville. Her mother's spirit lingered in every corner, from the jazz records in the lounge to the recipes that filled the kitchen with warmth. Losing it would be unthinkable, and Charlotte would fight with everything she had. But Vanessa's latest move was a masterstroke. A fabricated health inspection report leaked to local media, claiming violations that could shutter the hotel for weeks. As Charlotte met with her legal team in the executive suite, Kenneth appeared, his presence a quiet force. He carried a folder, its contents a lifeline. "I had a friend at the health department run a check," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "The report's fake. Here's the proof." He handed her documents stamped with official seals detailing the hotel's compliance. Charlotte's eyes widened, her gratitude tempered by curiosity. "How do you keep doing this?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. Kenneth's smile was enigmatic, a curved lip that promised answers he wasn't ready to give. "I told you I know people," he said, but his eyes held a depth that made her heart race. With the evidence, Charlotte planned a bold counterstrike, a public open house to showcase Baker's Haven's excellence. The event would invite the community media and city officials to see the truth themselves. Kenneth threw himself into the preparations, securing top-tier caterers and arranging for a local artist to display work inspired by Bronzeville's history. His efficiency was almost uncanny, and when Charlotte caught him on a call speaking in hushed tones about King Enterprises' backing, her suspicions flared anew. She said, "You're not just a guy with connections," her voice teasing, but sharp. "What's your game, Kenneth?" He turned to her, his green eyes catching the light like emeralds. "No game," he said, stepping closer, the space between them electric. "I'm here because this place matters, because you matter." His words sparkled, igniting a warmth in her chest that she couldn't deny. But Marcus burst in before she could press further, his face ashen. "Charlotte, you need to see this," he said, holding out his phone. The screen displayed a video posted anonymously, but unmistakably, Vanessa's work showing staged footage of unsanitary conditions in the hotel's kitchen. The lies were brazen, and the comments were vicious, tearing at the heart of Baker's Haven. Charlotte's blood boiled, but Kenneth's hand on her arm steadied her. "We'll expose this," he said, his voice a quiet vow. "Let's make the open house unforgettable." His confidence was a lifeline, and Charlotte clung to it, her resolve hardening. The event was set for the following evening, and the hotel buzzed with preparations. Charlotte worked alongside her staff, polishing silverware and arranging flowers, her mother's spirit guiding her every move. Kenneth was a constant presence, his charm disarming volunteers and vendors alike. When he carried a crate of fresh peaches for the dessert menu, his shirt clinging to his frame, Charlotte felt a flush of warmth she couldn't ignore. The open house was a triumph, and the ballroom was transformed into a celebration of Bronzeville's soul. Tables groaned with dishes inspired by her mother's recipes. Jambalaya cornbread, peach cobbler, each bite a testament to the hotel's heart. Local artists performed their music weaving through the crowd, and city officials mingled with residents, their praise a shield against Vanessa's lies. Charlotte moved through the room, her smile radiant, her mother's strength shining. Kenneth was at her side, his presence a quiet anchor, his hand brushing hers in moments that felt stolen from time. But Vanessa was not one to concede defeat. She arrived midway through her presence, a chill in the warm room. "Nice show, Charlotte," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "But it won't change the truth. This hotel is a sinking ship. You're going down with it." The crowd stirred, but Charlotte held her ground, her eyes blazing. She said, "The only thing sinking is your credibility," her voice cutting through the tension. "This hotel is Bronzeville's heart, stronger than your lies." A city official stepped forward before Vanessa could retort, holding Kenneth's documents. He said, "We've reviewed the health inspection claims. They're baseless. Baker's Haven is in full compliance." The crowd erupted in applause, and Vanessa's face twisted with rage. She leaned close to Charlotte, her voice a hiss. "You think you've won? I've got more up my sleeve." As she stormed out, Charlotte felt a triumph, tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over. Later, as the guests departed, Charlotte and Kenneth found themselves in the hotel's library, a cozy room lined with books and memories. The fire crackled in the hearth, glowing warmly over the leather armchairs. Charlotte sank into one, her exhaustion mingling with relief. Kenneth sat across from her, his eyes soft with admiration. "You were unstoppable tonight," he said, his voice a low hum that seemed to fill the room. Charlotte smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "I had help," she said, her gaze meeting his. "You keep pulling miracles out of thin air." Kenneth leaned forward, his hand reaching for hers, the touch sending a spark through her. "No miracles," he said. "Just believe in yourself." His words were a flame warming the spaces where doubt had lingered. Charlotte felt the pull of him, the possibility of a love that could withstand any storm. But as they sat there, the firelight dancing in his eyes, a new message from Marcus shattered the moment Vanessa had filed a lawsuit claiming ownership of Baker's Haven, based on a forged clause in their mother's will. The fight escalated, and Charlotte knew she would need every ounce of strength and Kenneth's support to prevail. As the Chicago night deepened its stars, a silent witness to their shared resolve, Charlotte felt a fire within her, a love, a legacy, a fight worth waging. Kenneth's hand lingered in hers, a promise that they would face the battle together. And in that moment, she dared to believe that love might be the most potent weapon of all. The Chicago dawn unfurled like a silken banner, its golden light bathing Bronzeville in a glow that felt like a promise. Baker's Haven stood as a monument to resilience, its Art Deco spires reaching for the sky, defiant against the storms that had sought to tear it down. Charlotte Baker moved through the hotel's grand lobby, her heart a tapestry of hope and trepidation. The battles of the past weeks, Vanessa's venomous schemes, the forged documents, the relentless attacks on her mother's legacy, had forged her into something more substantial. This woman carried the weight of Bronzeville's pride in her every step. Yet the man who had stood by her side, Kenneth King, remained an enigma, his green eyes holding secrets that thrilled and haunted her. Their shared moments dancing under the stars, fighting side by side, had kindled a flame she could no longer deny, but the shadow of his unspoken truth lingered, a question mark etched into her heart. The open house had been a triumph, a defiant stand against Vanessa's lies, but the lawsuit claiming ownership of Baker's Haven loomed like a gathering storm. Charlotte knew the fight was far from over, but with King Enterprises' backing, she saw a path forward. The investment promised survival and transformation, a chance to restore Baker's Haven to its former glory, a beacon of community and culture. Today, she stood on the cusp of that dream, preparing for a grand reopening that would cement her mother's legacy in Bronzeville's heart. Yet beneath her resolve, a quiet fear whispered, would Kenneth, her unexpected husband, stay when the dust settled, or was he merely a passing hero in her story? As she oversaw preparations in the ballroom, Charlotte's hands moved with purpose, arranging centerpieces of magnolia blossoms and candles that flickered like stars. The room was a canvas of elegance, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over tables set with her mother's recipes: jambalaya cornbread, peach cobbler. Each dish, a love letter to Bronzeville's soul. The community had rallied behind her volunteers, bustling alongside staff, their laughter, a symphony of hope. Yet Charlotte's thoughts drifted to Kenneth, who was coordinating with media outlets and local influencers to ensure the event reached far beyond Chicago's borders. His efficiency was almost uncanny, his charm disarming even the most skeptical reporters. But his connection to King Enterprises, hinted at in fleeting moments, gnawed at her. Was he truly here for her, or was a larger game at play? Kenneth appeared in the doorway, a quiet storm stirring her heart. His tailored blazer hugged his frame, and his green eyes sparkled with mischief, making her pulse quicken. "You're turning this place into a masterpiece," he said, his voice a low hum that seemed to resonate in the air. Charlotte smiled, wiping her hands on a cloth, her heart caught between gratitude and curiosity. She said, "You're not so bad at this," gesturing to the stack of press kits he'd prepared. "How do you know so much about media?" Kenneth's smile was enigmatic, a curved lip that promised answers he wasn't ready to give. He said, "I've picked up a few tricks." Stepping closer, the space between them charged with unspoken tension. Their moment was interrupted by Marcus, her assistant, who rushed in with a tablet. "Charlotte, You need to see this, he said, his voice tight and urgent. The screen displayed a legal notice. Vanessa's lawsuit had escalated with new claims that Charlotte had mismanaged the hotel's funds, backed by falsified financial records. The audacity of the lies took Charlotte's breath away, but Kenneth's hand on her arm steadied her. This is desperation, he said, his voice calm but firm. She's losing ground, and she knows it. We'll fight this with the truth. His confidence was a lifeline, and Charlotte clung to it, her resolve hardening. The reopening was set for that evening, and Charlotte threw herself into the final preparations, her mother's spirit guiding her every move. Kenneth was a whirlwind of action, securing last-minute sponsors and ensuring the event ran smoothly. Her suspicions flared anew when she caught him on a call speaking in hushed tones about King Enterprises' commitment. She said, "You keep mentioning King Enterprises and cornering him in the lobby. What's your real connection to them?" Kenneth's eyes met hers, and momentarily she saw a flicker of vulnerability. "I'm just a guy trying to do right by you," he said, his voice soft but earnest. "Trust me, Charlotte. Please." The reopening was a vision of splendor. The ballroom glowed with candlelight, the jazz band's soulful notes weaving through the crowd. Community leaders, city officials, and media filled the space, their praise a testament to Baker's Haven's enduring heart. Charlotte moved through the crowd, her smile radiant, her mother's strength shining. Kenneth was at her side, his presence a quiet anchor, his hand brushing hers in moments that felt stolen from time. He extended a hand as the band played a slow, sultry tune. One dance, he asked, his voice a velvet invitation. Charlotte took his hand, her heart pounding as he led her to the dance floor. His warm touch guided her with a confidence that felt new and familiar. They swayed to the music, the world fading, until it was just them moving in sync with Bronzeville's heartbeat. "You make this feel possible," she murmured, her cheek close to his. Kenneth's lips curved, his breath warm against her ear. "You make it real," he said, his voice a promise that sent a shiver down her spine. But the evening wasn't without its shadows. Vanessa arrived uninvited, her presence a chill in the warm room. She approached Charlotte, her voice low but venomous. "Enjoy your moment," she said. "This lawsuit will bury you." Charlotte's temper flared, but Kenneth's hand tightened on hers, grounding her. "You're fighting a losing battle," he said to Vanessa, his voice calm but edged with steel. "This hotel belongs to Charlotte, and no lie will change that." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, but she retreated, her exit a silent promise of further conflict. As the night drew to a close, Charlotte and Kenneth found themselves on the hotel's rooftop, the Chicago skyline, a glittering canvas below. The air was cool, scented with the promise of autumn, and the stars above seemed to pulse with possibility. Charlotte leaned against the railing, her heart tangled with hope and fear. "You keep saving me," she said, her voice soft but searching. "But I need to know if you're here to stay." Kenneth stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, sending warmth through her. "I'm here," he said, his voice a vow that lingered in the night air. "For you, for this place, for as long as you'll have me." Charlotte's heart raced, the weight of his words settling deep within her. She wanted to believe him, to let the flame of their connection burn bright. But as they stood there, the city's pulse echoing their own, a new message from Marcus shattered the moment Vanessa had hired a high-profile lawyer, escalating the lawsuit to a public battle that could ruin Baker's Haven's reputation for good. Charlotte felt a surge of fear, but Kenneth's hand in hers was a reminder that she wasn't alone. As the Chicago night deepened, she dared to believe their love, fragile, untested, but growing, might be her strength to face the fight ahead. The Chicago skyline blazed under a twilight sky, its towers aglow with the promise of a city that never surrendered. In Bronzeville, Baker's Haven stood as a testament to unbreakable spirit, its lights a warm embrace against the gathering dusk. Charlotte Baker stood in the hotel's grand ballroom, her heart a symphony of hope and resolve. The battles of the past weeks, Vanessa's relentless schemes, the forged documents, the public attacks had tested her to her core, but they had also revealed the strength within her. And at her side, through every storm, was Kenneth King, who had stepped into her life as a stranger and become something more profound. Their shared journey, kneading dough in the kitchen, dancing under the stars, fighting for her mother's legacy, had woven a bond that felt like destiny. Yet the shadow of his secrets still lingered, a final test of the love they had begun to build. The reopening had been a triumph, celebrating Baker's Haven's heart. But Vanessa's lawsuit loomed like a dark cloud. The fabricated clause in their mother's will, claiming Vanessa as the rightful heir, was a brazen lie, but its public nature threatened to tarnish the hotel's reputation. Charlotte knew the fight required more than legal battles. It demanded a public stand, a declaration of her mother's truth. Tonight she would host a gala, a final showcase of Baker's Haven's resilience, inviting the community media and city officials to witness its rebirth. But beneath her determination, a quiet fear whispered, would Kenneth, whose connection to King Enterprises remained a mystery, stand by her when the truth was fully revealed? The ballroom was elegant, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over tables adorned with roses and candles. The air was alive with the scent of her mother's recipes, gumbo sweet potato pie cornbread, each dish a testament to Bronzeville's soul. Volunteers and staff moved with purpose, their laughter a melody of hope. Charlotte wore a gown of deep sapphire, its fabric shimmering like the lake under moonlight, her dark curls cascading over her shoulders. She was a vision of strength, her mother's legacy shining through her every move. Kenneth was constantly present, coordinating with sponsors and charming guests effortlessly when she caught him adjusting a floral arrangement. His hands deft and sure. She felt a flush of warmth she could no longer deny. "You're making this place shine," she said, approaching him. Kenneth turned his green eyes, catching the light like emeralds, his smile a spark that ignited her heart. "It's your light that makes it glow," he said, his voice a low hum that seemed to fill the room. "I'm just along for the ride." His words were teasing, but his gaze held a depth that caught her breath. Charlotte wanted to press him to demand the whole truth of his connection to King Enterprises, but the urgency of the gala pulled her away. As the evening began, the ballroom filled with guests, community elders, local artists, city officials, and media. The jazz band played a soulful tune, its notes weaving through the crowd, a reminder of Baker's Haven's storied past. Charlotte took the stage, her presence commanding, her voice clear and resonant. She said that tonight we celebrate not just a hotel, but a legacy. My mother built Baker's Haven to be Bronzeville's heart, a place of community and pride. We stand stronger than ever, despite lies and attacks, and will not be broken. The crowd erupted in applause, their support a shield against Vanessa's schemes. But Vanessa was not one to miss an opportunity. She swept into the room, her crimson gown starkly contrasting with the warm elegance, her smile sharp and predatory. She called out, "Bold words, sister." Her voice cut through the applause. "But this hotel belongs to me, and no gala will change that." The crowd stirred, and Charlotte's heart pounded. But before she could respond, Kenneth stepped forward, his presence a quiet force. "Ms. Baker," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "you're fighting a losing battle. This hotel is Charlotte's, and no forged document will change that." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, but before she could retort, a city official joined them, holding a folder. "We've reviewed the lawsuit," he said. "The clause is fraudulent, and we have evidence of your involvement, Ms. Vanessa." He handed Charlotte documents and signed affidavits from former staff who had witnessed Vanessa's tampering. The crowd gasped, and Vanessa's face paled, her composure crumbling. She hissed, "You can't prove anything," but her voice lacked conviction. As security escorted her out, Charlotte felt a surge of triumph tempered by the weight of Kenneth's role in the victory. How had he secured those affidavits? The gala continued, the atmosphere lighter, the music soaring. Charlotte moved through the crowd, her smile radiant, but her thoughts were on Kenneth. She found him by the balcony doors, his silhouette sharp against the Chicago skyline. "You did it again," she said, her voice soft but searching. Those documents. How Kenneth turned his eyes, meeting hers, and momentarily she saw a flicker of vulnerability. "I told you I believe in you," he said. "And I have resources you don't know about yet." His words were teasing, but his gaze held a promise that made her heart race. Kenneth extended a hand as the band struck up a slow, romantic tune. "One last dance." He asked, his voice a velvet invitation. Charlotte took his hand, her heart pounding as he led her to the dance floor. Their bodies moved in sync, the world fading until it was just them swaying under the chandeliers. "I don't know everything about you," she murmured, her cheek close to his. "But I want to." Kenneth's lips curved, his breath warm against her ear. "Then let me show you," he said, his voice a vow that sent a shiver down her spine. The music swelled, and Kenneth stopped, his hands framing her face. The crowd faded, the ballroom a blur, as he sank to one knee. "Charlotte Baker," he said, his voice clear and resonant. "I came here to make a promise to your mother, but I stayed for you. You're my heart, my home, my everything. Will you marry me again for real? For love?" He held out a ring, its sapphire gleaming like the lake under moonlight, symbolizing their shared journey. Charlotte's breath caught tears shimmering in her eyes. She saw the truth in his gaze, not just a man with secrets, but a man who loved her fiercely and fully. "Yes," she whispered, and the crowd erupted in cheers, their joy a crescendo that echoed through Bronzeville. As they kissed, the Chicago skyline glittered below its lights, a mirror to the fire in their hearts. Vanessa's schemes were defeated, her lies exposed, and Baker's Haven stood stronger than ever, a beacon of love and legacy. Charlotte and Kenneth stepped onto the balcony hand in hand, the city's pulse syncing with their own. "I'm ready to know you," she said, her voice soft but certain. Kenneth smiled, his eyes reflecting the stars. "And I'm prepared to be yours," he said, sealing their vow with a kiss that felt like forever. If this love legacy and triumph story moved you, hit that like button to show your support. Share this tale with friends who love a good romance, and drop a comment below to tell us how Charlotte and Kenneth's journey touched your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories celebrating love and resilience. Join our community, and let's keep the dream alive.